Flow splitters like this one can be used to deliver oxygen to multiple patients instead of one patient from an oxygen concentrator like this. But if these commercial flow splitters are not available, you can easily make one using oxygen concentrators that are broken, taking the flow meters out and using some of the parts inside this to build your own. Behind me I've got some broken oxygen concentrators and I'm going to show you how to build a flow splitter. We're going to be using an Aircept Visionaire which is broken to build our flow splitter. You're going to need at least 2 oxygen concentrators to build a flow splitter. The tools that you require are simply a flat screwdriver and a Phillips head screwdriver. This may vary depending on your oxygen concentrator, but all in all, these 2 tools should do the trick. Step 1 is to take the case off your oxygen concentrator. On the Visionaire, the front is pretty easy. There's 2 screws at the top and then a bit of a pull and you can get the front off. The back is a similar process. 2 screws. It's a little bit more difficult to get off though. From the front of the concentrator, we're going to be taking out this flow meter. From the back of the concentrator, we're going to be taking out these T-pieces and this tubing. Okay, our first step is to remove the flow meter. On the Visionaire, there's a screw down here, which is holding it in place. In this instance, it required a Phillips head. Now that that is removed, the flow meter comes free easily, and you can still see the tubes are attached to the back. On this oxygen concentrator, I think the best parts to use are these long tubes into this T-piece, and then another tube over here. So what we'll do, we're going to disconnect it from this section over here and down the bottom. See how it's done. These cable ties are holding on the tube quite tight. If you have scissors, you can cut them off. If you don't, you can use a screwdriver to try and get underneath them and break them that way. I've been able to slide it off the barb, which will allow it to come off more easily. To make the disassembly easier, using some scissors or some cutters can be really handy. I'm going to use them throughout this part of the video, but if you don't have them, you should be able to break these cable ties by other means, using a screwdriver or a knife or something similar to that. Sometimes they don't want to come off and they're a bit too stuck on. In this instance, you can actually just cut the pipe because you don't need the full length. Okay, now we have some tube with a T-piece in the middle. We have a valve here that we don't really need, so why don't we go ahead and cut that off. Okay, so we have a T-piece with a tube on each end. We're going to need another tube for this section, but first let's get the flow meter out. Okay, now we're going to get the flow meter out. My advice is to simply just cut these tubes. And now you have the flow meter out. It's a bit tricky, but you can try and pull some of these cable ties off, which are a little bit bigger, and then try and use them to secure your smaller sections. So I'm going to put that over there, plug in my barb, now I'm going to see if I can tighten this cable tie. Try and get it on the camera. So you can see now I've got that cable tie over the barb, which is going to allow it to hold a little bit better. With just your fingers, you can try and tighten it even more. And now it's held pretty well. Okay, now we're going to pull the second one out. And because we've already got some tube on this one, we don't need this bottom one at all. Cable ties off, should be able to pull it. Okay, got that off. What we're going to do next is join it up onto this. I forgot to mention one thing. There's a little metal piece inside this tube underneath this cable tie. It's going to make it harder for the oxygen to flow through because it makes the pipe smaller. I don't think we need this, so I'm going to use a different piece of pipe and throw this one away. To get our pipe onto the flow meter, we just need to push it quite hard over this barb. It helps by pushing it up and down as you go along. If this becomes too hard to do, a little trick is to get some hot water, and you can dip the tube like this into the water and let it sit. The hot water makes the tube softer and easier to push on. Okay, I've assembled them with the T-piece now. You can see they're connected, and there's this barb at the back where we can go plug the oxygen concentrator in, and we need to find a way to get these off to the patient. We're going to need a way to get these pipes onto something that you can put nasal prongs on. Luckily, in the AirSet Visionaire, there's this piece in here. I've got another one over here. It changes from a smaller black pipe into a larger green pipe. The size of this green pipe is about the same as a nasal cannula. I'll show you. Now I've got this metal piece out. I've got the flow split. I'm going to put the metal piece into the back. I'm just going to cut this square. As you can see, it's on an angle. Okay, so I've got that in the back. And now we have some nasal cannulae. This is for giving oxygen to, this one's for a baby. We can now plug this on to the back. This is one solution. It's okay, but the danger is when you pull the nasal cannulae off, this might come out as well. So we'll look at some other ways. Now I've finished assembling the flow splitter parts. You can see there's a tube and another tube going into the bottom of these flow meters. This tube gets connected to the oxygen concentrator. At the top, I've got these adapters which will allow you to connect to the patient. If you don't have the same oxygen concentrator as me, the flow meters are going to look different and you may need to find another solution for these adapters. Worst case, you can pull off the tube from here and connect the patient directly onto the back of the flow meter. That should work on most oxygen concentrators. I'm going to be using this cardboard box to mount the flow meters to create the flow splitter which we will be able to use. I'm going to need to put 4 holes into the box for the top and for the bottom. To do this, I am going to have to take off the pipes just for 1 second. So I can line it up and put a hole in the top, put a hole in the bottom. They're going to need to be a bit bigger, so just use whatever you've got to try and make the hole bigger. Screwdriver helps, you can sort of spin it around like this. Oh, a bit much. Okay, now I've got holes that are probably big enough for my flow meter. These flow meters are easy to mount. They have these screws on them that we can take off and we can screw them on the other side. Flow meter mounted, I'm going to screw it in on the back. Okay, that took a while, but I've got one mounted now. Now I've got my oxygen concentrator Now I've got my flow meters mounted. I'm going to put a little hole in the top so that we can access the barb for the patient. Okay, now I've got the barbs coming out the top, and I'm going to stick onto the back what we made a little bit earlier. Okay, now this needs to go off to the oxygen concentrator. I'm going to put a hole in the back. Okay, we're finished. We can plug that into the oxygen concentrator. Please do a better job than I did with mounting these straight. I'll do this again. Here we've got an oxygen concentrator and we're going to turn it on. This one does 5 litres per minute. This will also work with 10 litre per minute oxygen concentrators. Now we can see the flow of oxygen. We don't actually want to have it too far above 5 litres per minute, otherwise the purity of the oxygen can be less. We're going to put a barb onto it. Now that the concentrator is running, we're going to plug in our flow box. We're going to put the input onto the back here. And now you can see that we have 2 flows coming out. We've successfully split 1 flow meter into 2 flow meters.